Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel Moxie DIY in Java. I'm Michelle. Today's video is going to be all about the jack-o'-lantern. So grab your cup of coffee or your favorite beverage and join me. Okay, to start this DIY, we're going to take a standard candy bucket, and I have removed the handle, and I'm just going to use some sandpaper to rough up the plastic just a little bit. Now to create the lid, I found this round at Michael's. I think it was 98 cents, and I just glued it to this plastic plate, which is one of the appetizer plates from the Dollar Tree. And it's going to create this really fantastic lid that will fit perfectly into this candy bucket, and it won't move. Look at that fit, isn't that amazing? And then we're going to take the sandpaper lightly over the plate just to give the clay something to grab onto. Now I'm just going to be using some Sculpting air dry clay that I got from Hobby Lobby, and we are going to create the top of the pumpkin. And we're going to try to follow the lines that are already indented on our bucket just to create a more seamless look. So all I'm doing here is I'm going to create a disc of clay to fit over the plate. And I'm going to use not only my fingers, but a small fondant rolling pin. I don't use it for fondant at all. I strictly use it for crafting. But it is a really great tool to use with the clay because those little rings on the ends help to maintain the width of the clay. This DIY was actually inspired from Pottery Barn, the Snoopy lidded candy bowl, and I saw this and I loved it, but I don't love the price. I'm not going to pay $129 for a seasonal item. So we're going to make it, and I'm going to show you how to do it too. Once the clay disc fits just right, we're going to use some water as our glue, and then we're going to start to make our indents for the top. And I'm just going to use good old twine, and then the wood carving tools, also from the Dollar Tree. They are fantastic with clay. Now to get this sealed, I'm going to pinch it along the edges, and then to create a more seamless look, always use water and fingers. That's the best way to do it. Now, as mentioned before, we're literally just going to follow the indents that are already on the bucket. The lines made with the twine are simply going to be our guide. We're not going to use them to finish off the look. So if they're kind of off, that's okay. Don't let that get to you. All I'm doing here is I'm just creating more of an indent to the lines that I made with the twine. And then I'm going to start rounding off the edges along the edge of that lid. And the way I'm going to do that is using a more rounded tool. And I'm just going to be kind of carving out a rounded edge again, just so that way it blends with the pumpkin bucket. And don't worry if you see the plate beneath, we're going to take care of that once the clay has dried. Now that I've rounded off all of the segments, we're now going to pinch again, but this time we're going to pinch and pull. And this is going to help the segments kind of reach over the edge of the lid, so that way it creates more of a lip. but we don't want it to reach too far. So we'll use our tool to kind of clean that part up because we don't want it to get in the way of the lid either. Then using a mostly dry finger, I'm going to go over that lip that has been cut and just round it off yet again. And then we'll let it dry. It took mine about 2 days. While that dries, we're going to work on our Snoopy. And to make his body, I'm going to make kind of a bullet shape. And then we're going to take our 2 fingers and we're going to press and spread on the tips. And that's going to create his tummy because he's got a little bit of a pot belly, which is super cute in my opinion. And then we're going to use the parts that we tapered for his legs and his head. So tummy, head, and legs. Moving on to his legs, we're going to create a snake where it's narrower on one end than the other. And we're going to put a ball on the tip, and that's going to be his toes. So all I'm going to do is create his ankles. And to do that, I'm just kind of pressing my finger towards the other and just molding it, and it's one of those trial and error things. I just kept messing with it and getting it to how it looked best to me. Next up are his arms, and we're going to create thin snakes for those. With this tool, I'm using it to press in and drag the arm clay into his body clay. And in my opinion, it just seems to help it adhere better to a piece of clay that has already been molded. And I just repeat that with the other arm. Now we're moving on to his face. And this, we're going to start out with another bullet shape, and then we're going to cut it and mold it to the correct size and shape. And we will be using a bead for his nose. I figured that would just be easier than trying to sculpt his quintessential nose, and this bead actually ended up working out really well. And as you can see, I'm just covering it up with clay. Okay, I think his head looks good, so now we're going to move on to his ears. And once again, that's just going to be a thin snake, and we're going to attach it to each side of his head and flatten them out into a sort of rounded rectangle, and then that will eventually become his ear. And we're going to let Snoopy dry. He took about 2 days as well. He did have a little bit of an accident, but it ended up being a good thing because it made it easier for me to paint his face and his collar. Now I did paint his entire body white from head to toe, and that's just so that way it's a uniform white. And I'm going to use a combination of a thin paintbrush, which I got at the Dollar Tree, with my black paint, as well as Sharpies. Now I am painting Snoopy with his quintessential markings, but I think this would be super cute if you have a dog. Paint this figure with your pup's markings. Yep, I didn't like that, so I'm going to let that dry and then I'm going to paint over it with white. Now for his eyes, we're going to make long rectangles, and I'm trying to show you here. I hope that you can see it. I realize it's kind of grainy, but you're just going to make long rectangles for his eyes. There's his cute little face, and then his mouth I'm going to fix and then use a Sharpie. And while he dries, we're going to work on the lid. Now I put caulking on the lid to go in between all of the cracks to make it look more like the bucket, and I think that that turned out really cool. And as you can see, I'm just painting it black, and then I'm going to paint the bucket black, and that took 3 coats on the bucket and 2 coats on the lid. Now to work on Snoopy's smirk again. I'm just going to use this thin Sharpie to create his mouth. It's kind of upturned at the corners, and then I'm going to use the thick Sharpie to make it easier to see. Now, technically speaking, this lid doesn't really have a front, but I tried to line up the indents so that way I knew where I wanted to place Snoopy. And I'm going to be using a combination of permanent glue, hot glue, and caulking. I'm using the caulking primarily for his head because we lost a little piece of it and there was a pretty good sized gap between his neck and his head. So we're going to use the caulking to kind of fill that in, and then we'll paint it once it's dried to blend in and you won't even see it. And it's going to be a combination of that with permanent glue. And you'll see that I put his head on and then remove it, and that's just so that way I can get the permanent glue on those ears. Before the caulking dries, I use a very damp paintbrush to kind of mold it to Snoopy's head, so that way there isn't a big glob of caulking where there shouldn't be. If you're enjoying what you're seeing so far, I hope that you will consider subscribing to my channel, or at the very least liking this video. Not only does it tell YouTube that you like my channel, but it also tells me what kind of content you like. And if you're already a part of the Moxie family, I am so thankful that you're here, and I love that we get to spend time together. And here it is, all finished. What do you think? I'm going to spray it with a clear coat so that way the paint does not chip off. So what do you think? Did I get it right? Okay, this DIY is all over Instagram, but I wanted to try it anyway because I think I might have a different take on it than some other people. Now this is based off of the Pottery Barn handmade terracotta jack-o'-lanterns, and they were beautiful, and I'm not gonna pay $49.50 for a small jack-o'-lantern. Sorry, it's just not gonna happen. So I'm gonna make my own. Now to create the handmade look of the stem, we're going to once again use the Sculpting clay, and I showed 3 pieces here, but I actually used 4, and I just kind of made them into a snake, but then I flattened them out and put them onto the existing stem of this jack-o'-lantern. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use your fingers and press it in and down onto the jack-o'-lantern, and then to create the look of a stem, we're going to twist it. And with the 4 segments twisted together, it creates a really cool looking stem. Once it looks the way I think it should, we're going to let it dry. It took about a day. Next, we're going to create the look of aged terracotta. And to do that, we're going to use Pink Cloud by Waverly, Espresso, and Orange by Craftsmart. I ended up not needing the lighter brown, but I got it out just in case I ran out of the espresso because I'm really low. And once we get all of those paints combined, we're going to add some baking soda so that way we can get the texture of terracotta. You'll notice that there's already a coat of this color on the pumpkin, and I did that to kind of create a primer of sorts. The texture I wanted was that of toothpaste. So it's a little bit runny but thick at the same time. And this seemed to make a really good texture for this. It wasn't too clumpy, and it still had an obvious texture to it that terracotta has. And now, as you can see, I'm just going to paint it on. I'm not going thick, but I am making sure that all of the crevices that need to be painted or gone over are done. Now, these pumpkins have removable lights. Make sure you remove it before you paint it, because if we're going for a high-end look, painted cords don't really help with that high-end look. So I'm just painting everything with this paint. We're going to let it dry and then move on to the powdering. Now, a lot of people have shown flour, and I'm always hesitant to use food products for seasonal decor items because I do not want critters to get into them. So instead of using flour, we're going to use this body powder, and I think it worked out beautifully. So all we're going to do is apply a second coat of the paint to the top 2/3 of the pumpkin, including the stem. And while it's still wet, we're going to pretty much douse it with this body powder. And bonus, it smells really good. It's got a nice fresh scent. Once you feel like there's enough powder, we're going to take another clean brush and we're going to gently brush it off. And as you can see, I have it on a bucket, but powder still literally went everywhere. So don't expect this to be a clean project, but the results are amazing. So I think it's worth it. Once the paint under the powder is fully dry, I'm going to seal this completely with a matte clear spray paint. But here it is. What do you think? Does it look like it's terracotta? I love it. I also did this to one of Dollar Tree's glittered pumpkins, and I'm really happy with the results. I can't wait to put them out for Halloween. I'm so excited I get to add this video to the It's the Great Jack-O'-Lantern Halloween DIYs, and I got to collaborate with my friends Jackie of Crafting in Mimi's World and Marie of Desert Rose Crafting. And we wanted to get together to give you, our YouTube viewers, new looks at different ways to make jack-o'-lanterns. So I hope that you will watch the playlist. It's going to be a relatively short one with just the 3 of us, but I know it's going to be full of really cool inspiration. So be sure to check it out. I'll have everything linked down below. This is going to be a different take of the jack-o'-lantern. My mom gave me this glass pumpkin, and I'm so excited she did because I get to use it for this DIY. Now, this printable came from the Navage Patch, and I will link them down below. Their printables are free as long as you give them your email address, but trust me, it's so worth it because they have some beautiful printables. And all I did was I just crinkled it up, and I'm going to tack it down with my hot glue gun. Now, you can either use hot glue, glue dots, or double-sided tape, whatever you have on hand. Or you don't have to tack it on down at all, it's up to you. We're going to create kind of a little pocket with the printable, and inside we're going to include fairy lights along with leaves, and that's it. And we have a lit up pumpkin. It's kind of like a jack-o'-lantern, but it has a really cool quote on it all about jack-o'-lanterns and All Hallows Eve. So I thought it worked as a jack-o'-lantern, but what do you think? Alright, here are my 3 takes on the jack-o'-lantern. Be sure to comment down below and let me know how you think I did with the dupes and if you think you might recreate any of these. I would love to know which ones were your favorite too. Mine is probably going to be the Snoopy because the Great Pumpkin from Charlie Brown has always been a favorite of mine, especially around Halloween time. Well, I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I hope that you enjoyed watching the video as much as I enjoyed making it, and until I see you in the next one, take care.